In watercolor, to make something lighter, we obviously add more water to the pigment and allow the color of the paper, which is white, to come through. Hence the transparent nature of watercolors, or using the transparent nature of watercolors to our advantage. However, what do you do when you want an area to be white and be the color of the paper? Well, that's where a resist comes into play, and that's what we're going to be looking at right now. Resist, which basically means we're going to put something on the paper that's going to prevent or resist the paint from going into that area, thus preserving the white of the paper, and in some instances the color that you have put down. So that's what a resist is going to do. When we look at this sheet, we'll notice that we're going to be using masking tape to preserve 3 layers of color minimum and 1 area of white minimum. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some masking tape, and while yes, I don't necessarily have to tear this up, all I have to do is I can just put it right down however I want, but I like to tear it up to create a little bit more of an interesting edge, so it's not just something kind of boring, but rather I play with the idea of what the resist can actually do for me. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put down some layers of masking tape, tearing the masking tape to create, like I said, those interesting little edges. Now, there's no rule as to how much you have to use at this point. It's just we're just having some fun, just learning the technique of resist to see what it's going to do. Now, I'm almost done here. I'm just going to put one more down. And there we go. That's enough. So now what I'm going to do is, before I actually put any pigment down, what I like to do is make sure that my masking tape is nice and adhere to the paper. And I personally, because I prefer to keep a very light first layer, is I'm going to put down some water. So as you can see, this is going to wind up being a wet into wet for my first layer. So I put that down. I'm going to add a touch of the ultramarine blue. So I'm going to be using a lot more water than I am going to be using pigment. And I'm going to put that down, allowing some areas to be a little bit thicker than others, a little bit darker than others. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, right now, all we're doing is learning how to use a resist, what it does for us. So I'm not necessarily making any work of art here, just practicing a technique. Now comes the waiting game. I have to wait for this layer to dry before I can apply another layer.